It's,
Okay, I think we could get rolling, and if people straggle in late, that's okay. But I also know we have plenty of people who are wanting to just watch a recorded version later.
Cool.
And so we can get going. One thing I did, I went ahead and posted in the chat just a link to the page, and it has links to the homework for afterward. That's just some suggested questions. We'll talk about that later. And then also a link to submit a question for the Q&R section at the end. We'll rally those up. And so basically, if you think of something during the talk and you don't want to, forget it, then you can just go ahead and submit it during. And so just dentonnorthchurch.com/marriage is the hub for all that stuff. And like I said, this is being recorded. And so if you want to watch it again later, we'll be posting that. And I'll probably just end up posting it in all the church groups so that everybody can, I don't have to keep track of who all asked for it. And I think that might be it. I'm going to pray for this and for the Knoles real quick. And then I think most of us know them to some degree. For me, I've been around a lot of Knoles fans more than I have been around the Knoles themselves, honestly. But it might be helpful to, after I pray, you guys just introduce yourselves a little bit and give some context to why we should all listen to what you have to say. But I'll pray real quick. Lord, thank you so much for just the chance to get together and try to follow you more closely together as married couples. And thank you for this community and this family of churches and just the ability to try to learn from each other's experiences and just being able to share in that with each other. And thank you for the great work you've done in other people, and that we can all learn from each other and learn from the growth and transformative work that you've done in many, many people that we have the privilege to get to minister alongside. I just ask that you'd speak through the Knoles and help them to just to direct us toward your truth and toward ways to just keep being your disciples and be on mission as we are also married, and help us to grow together with our spouses. And Lord, we just ask that you would be glorified by our discussion today, and help us just to all be moved closer toward you. And we just ask for grace as we do that. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks a lot. So, intro. We've been married now coming on 14 years, like this coming week. So we've been doing it for a while. And
I still like him, so that's good.
That is good. Bonus lesson, watch those terrible movies we were just talking about with your wife, and things will go better. No. But so we've been trying to do, obviously discipleship stuff as Christians and ministry as part of our marriage and individually the whole way through. That in no way means we're experts or even great at it all the time. But we do have some practice at it. I'm currently on staff in Garland. And I'm sort of our men's minister, and I lead our praise team and try to coordinate stuff with the staff and elders. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years or so. And before that, I did the Focus thing like a lot of you all, and the Corfa stuff, and learned how to do ministry really for the first time on the campus. So that's a short version of me. What you've been doing?
Whole lot of nothing. No, I still do the Focus deal. They can't seem to get rid of me. I just kind of hover around and get included. Currently, I'm a peer team leader, kind of function as like an adjunct staff member, and serve on the Focus board. And I help with the women's ministry at Garland, and raise crazy kiddos. So that's its own ministry in itself. But yeah, that's kind of my deal. I've been around a while. So I came to Focus in 2002, and still here. So I haven't graduated yet out of Focus. I need lots of help. So they keep me around.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I do have a day job. Like I work at a big bank full time, and the twin thing, and different ministries. We probably try to do too much sometimes, but some of the balance and how to fit some of this in, we'll definitely try to speak to throughout this. But so the whole deal, spiritual health and being disciples, this is a huge topic, right? Very fundamental to our faith. We're going to try and talk through that in the context of marriage and doing that together as spouses. We're certainly packing a whole lot of different topics into a pretty quick deal this afternoon, and that's on purpose. But like it was said in the beginning, be ready with some questions. We'd be happy to dive deeper on anything we talk about at the end in that Q&A part of it. Because we're going to hit a lot of things pretty quickly, and therefore not going really deep into it. But we can do that based on questions later. And we feel it's important to say we're definitely not like experts or the perfect married couple in any way. We're not the best ministers or anything like that. So we're speaking to principles that we are still striving to grow in. For sure. And, that's every sermon, every preacher, whatever. But we want
they assign it to you so that you're the one that gets better at those things.
Right. So one other caveat, maybe as we dive in, we wanted to talk about, marriage is not a one size fits all proposition. Outside of the common calling that all of us as disciples trying to follow Jesus, we share in. We all are trying to love God and love people. But the way our individual marriages and relationships look will certainly be different. And that's fine. So as we speak to some of how we've done things, that hopefully that's challenging and maybe a bit enriching or whatever, but it doesn't mean the perfect marriage or whatever has to do it in the exact same way. That diversity and different family groups is really part of what makes the body of Christ great. But, that can also be a little bit of a crutch or a way for some of us to try and, back out of the mission. So we do hope to challenge you a bit. So however it looks for you to take part in the mission of Jesus to bless the world with your marriage. So, I think that's good intro-ish. All right. We've got this split up in really two main halves. The first being spiritual health, and we're going to talk about that both as individuals and as spouses. And then we'll move on to basically ministry after marriage and hit on several practical ideas about how to do ministry once you're married. Okay. Sound good? Yes, it does. Spiritual health. We're going to start individually, and then we'll go towards how to do it as a couple. Individual time with God, in the busyness of life, and specifically, as a married couple. This is of, the utmost importance, right? Some of this is very basic, the discipleship 101. But if you want to be a good spouse, if you want to have a good marriage, you've got to stay connected to God. And that has to be first priority. You have to be a disciple individually. This will drive everything else in your life, as I think we all know and understand. But just to remember and strive for that is very important. Connecting with God will really determine in a lot of ways whether or not you're a fun, happy spouse to be around or sort of a drag and a selfish sort of pull on things. And so that regular reconnecting with God and his mission individually, it goes without saying, but it's the most important thing on here. And so we've got to build time for it and try to make it happen. The selflessness that runs all the way through the New Testament really starts here as we try to live like Jesus. And one of the things We say a lot to people in like Guide to Decide sessions or whatever, is that if you'll, do your best to look out for your spouse's best interest, and while they're doing the same, your needs will certainly be met. And so you want to start at things that way, and it starts with that individual devotion to God. It can certainly, your level of devotion, your connection to God will impact your marriage. And so that's for good and for bad. If you're lacking there, it'll pull on your spouse and can be detrimental to what's going on. If you think about, going all the way back to Genesis 2, when they start, framing up marriage, and like all things in Scripture, especially the beginning of Genesis, they're doing 100 things here with this passage. But Genesis 2:24 says, that's why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. That one flesh aspect, again, tons going on there. But, for this purpose, you can think of that as just a reiteration. Our spiritual well-being impacts each other. And we can't escape the fact that how I'm doing influences Amy, and how she's doing influences me. That one flesh nature, we're completely tied to each other, whether we like that or not. Every decision, it's no longer just about how it affects me. We have to make decisions together, and we're one, and how we move through life. And so if she hurts, I hurt. If she's happy, I'm happy. And in a lot of ways, if you're connecting with God and doing well spiritually, you'll pull each other in that direction as well. And so you want to keep in mind the profound impact we have on each other, even when it's unintended. And so it's just completely important to stay connected with God and let the Spirit influence you in all of that. So again, I'm pretty sure everyone here agrees with that. Let's talk a minute just about some realistic strategies, I guess, to get that done. You've got to give each other individual space. That can be harder for some couples than others. And it really depends on you individually and how you work together, whether or not, you're introverted or extroverted, like that alone time or need that together time more or less will make this easier or harder. But you certainly have to build routines to give each other some individual space.
Yeah, and obviously, as different seasons of life happen, like that can need to look different and can need to shift. I just remember kind of going from being single and I had my schedule and my time, and it's like, well, I like to do, my time at this time of day, and this is what it looks like. And then, I packed my Bible and my journal, and all my stuff for my honeymoon. And then there was just this real weird, we're in the same space all the time. Do I go sit in a corner? What do I do? I just had this weird thing of oh yeah, this is the deal from now on, is we're just in each other's lives. And at night when I liked to kind of unwind and spend time with God, who's there? he is there and in my space. So then that was kind of the first time I had even considered that, my schedule might need to change to still have that meaningful time. And then we had the tiniest apartment, and I am one of the people he was talking about. That's if there's a person, I feel the need to go be with that person. It feels weird to me to not be in the same room or not be talking to someone if they're there. He is not that way at all. But I just felt so weird, picking up my stuff and going into the one other room we had to read my Bible or journal or whatever. That was a kind of a hard adjustment for me. And then it's then we had kids. We have 2 newborns. well, where's my hour to sit down and read and reflect? There's not an hour for anything. Like, I don't get an hour for sleep. So yeah, being creative and trying to realize like, yeah, I may have to kind of work on some of my personal preferences and how I want to do things to help kind of facilitate that for my partner to also have that good time. Or even just changing expectations on, if you've got a newborn baby, you need to have some time with God. That's all that's going to keep you going. But it's probably not going to look the same, but just keeping that commitment to that investment in your relationship with God and being okay that in different seasons that can look a little different.
Yeah.
I realized I just said a whole bunch of stuff all together.
No, that's great.
Our dynamic doing things like this is very different than our dynamic in any other situation in life. I'm the talker and he's quiet. And then we do things like this and he is the talker. And then I babble a little bit. So back to you.
Nonsense. One of the ways, being creative to find individual time, this is just sort of anecdotal, I guess, something that helped me. I really, somewhere along the way was encouraged to sort of transform my commute time, driving to and from work and making it more purposeful. And that became a real sort of spiritually enriching time. Just, for me, I can get into podcasts or whatever sort of Bible teaching kind of things that gets me excited about the word and helps me dive in later or even times in prayer. Just as one example, like you do have to be creative to fit things in. And Amy mentioned, the kids really turns everything upside down, at least for a little while. And so you just have to build routines and try your best to fit things in. It was, I think it was Ronnie that told me, and I totally got it later on, but trying to get up early before your kids, at least in my experience, is kind of a joke. Like
they hear you, they sense you that you're awake.
Yeah, it's wild. And so, even just the idea that I'm going to do my time with God first thing in the morning every day all by myself, like I had to be flexible there. And that's okay. And really, as they've grown, our kids are just turned 8. And so they're different every single day too. So you just kind of move in and out of these different routines. But it's the same drumbeat. You just got to make it happen. So get creative and find the habits and the routines that make sense for the season of life you're in, and then know and agree together. We both think this is important. We both want to have individual time with God. If you need to plan some of that together, just do it. Have that conversation, check in every now and then, and set some things up so that you're helping each other find that time with God.
Yeah, that was the other thing I would say is, just communication. If you're finding like that something is like in the dynamic of the marriage or like how the schedule is going, just makes it almost impossible to get that time, then you just have to reach out and say, I need this space. Like, what can we do? Can we have this time where like for us, like you hang with the kids and I'm going to go for this walk or like whatever that looks like, but to always be in communication about that, because that's not the thing that you want to just ignore and not talk about because you feel like, well, this is really just my deal. And so I should figure it out. Like, no, like your spouse is there. And even though it is about your individual time, it does affect your spouse. And so communicating with them about, or even getting their input on like, I can't fit this into my day. I don't know how to do this. And like having that conversation, that y'all can like, troubleshoot that together. Yep.
And that's a great, transition. Next, we're going to move towards spiritual health as a couple and think through how to do that together and grow together. And as we do that, I would just reiterate, like, your marriage will be better if you do the individual devotion to God. And if you get that right and nothing else, that's the best place to start. So yeah, spiritual health together as a couple, thinking through sort of how to check in on each other's spiritual health, how to encourage or challenge, that's different as a spouse than a spiritual friend or mentor. And unfortunately, and even with us, we're not perfect at this. It can be awkward in a marriage, especially if you've got a lot of routines as a disciple beforehand, coming into your marriage. But yeah, one thing that's just super important here is to ask the question. Check in with each other. Just ask, how are you doing spiritually? The homework that was mentioned has some very practical questions they'll help you in this later, if you haven't seen it already. But
his note said ask the question.
Yeah.
And then my note said answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
Really answer the question. Do your best to give a generous answer. Because your spouse really does want to know how you're doing. That is, you don't need to put on that, it's okay. Oh yeah, I'm doing great. Reading Genesis, it's awesome. No, really, expand on that. And if you feel okay, I asked them how they were and they kind of just said fine and gave me I'm reading this book. And they're I don't really know what that means. Or if that person is fine, follow up. Don't be afraid to really kind of dig in there, because sometimes one of our deals that's obviously very specific to us is just the way we communicate is on opposite ends of the spectrum. So he feels like he's fully answering a question. And I'm you didn't even scratch the surface of what I was expecting to hear in my response. And he's just hey, what's up? And I'm everything going on in my mind, in my life. And I just dump, with half a question. And with him, I'm okay, I really want to get specific and ask, what is it I'm really wanting to know? It's if I'm wanting to know about his prayer life, then I need to, dig in there and say how's your prayer time been looking? What does that look like for you this week?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever that is.
Yeah. No, for sure. That's us. I'm a bad sharer. I guess kind of stereotypical, just dumb man in that way. But, and so, I've got to really lean into that. And she's helped me a lot with that over the years. I still have a ton of room to grow, but yeah, it's another just fantastic way to be close together, and obviously one that's meaningful and pushes you towards God, but it's an intimacy that can really help grow a marriage. And so something certainly that should be practiced and added to sort of your routine of what you do together. So ask the question, just get in there and interrupt each other's lives and check in, look out for their spiritual well-being. Another part of this is pay attention. Look out for what they're doing. We know the things that we ought to be doing. And sometimes, especially if we're not in a great place ourselves, it's easy not to go check on other people. And so we've got to really work and have your spouse's spiritual well-being as part of what you're looking out for and thinking about. And so you can pay attention and check in on their moods and just what's exciting them, what's got them down. Are they stressed out? Are they sad? Whatever it is, you want to pay attention and use that as part of asking the question.
Yeah. And I'd say too, I know it is super easy. It's there's always something going on. There's the TV's on or you're on your phone or whatever, but these are not conversations to have where you're hey, how's your prayer life going? And then you're doing some game or whatever. No, that's a time that you need to communicate with all of yourself that this is important. This is a put down the phone, a look each other in the eye kind of conversation. This is an important one. It's not what did you think about that cereal I bought? Like, it's, I'm asking you. And so like those good, this is my, like, be a good communicator, like actively listen. If you're not sure, you understand, like kind of that repeat back. Okay, that's something I want to flag and like check in on again. They said this is something they're kind of struggling with. Okay, I'm going to flag that so I can pray. I'm going to flag that so I can ask specifically about that again. But you have to like really engage in that and not have it be, how are you? Good. Okay. How are you? All right. But yeah, have that be a really focused, like pull out your best communicating to have those kind of conversations.
Definitely. One other thing that can really help in, looking out for each other's spiritual well-being, is really encouraging the right things in each other. And that can be the first thing we talked about, just encouraging the individual time with God, but, encouraging good time with spiritual friends and mentors, all the things. And we'll talk about these in the practical ministry section later, but encouraging the church involvement, small group, everything that has us as Christians and disciples, connecting with God and engaging in his mission, we need to encourage in our spouses. And that can be a big part of connecting spiritually together. Certainly, you want to look out for one another. You want to hold each other accountable a little bit. You want to know how the other is doing spiritually, but you also don't want to be alone in that. You want your spouse to have good friends. You want your spouse to have a mentor. You want your spouse to be in a small group and be excited about church and worship and the whole deal. You got to encourage that broad spectrum to really create the balanced approach that'll be best for both of you. Let's see. Building ministry into your life can help maintain a connection. We've got that, being on staff in different places, even just having to prepare for something like this just straight up forced us into some spiritual conversations. If you need some routines to make that happen, like sign up for stuff like this. Amy preached last night at Focus. And so we were talking through her sermon, leading up to that the last couple days or whatever. We're both in various groups and try our best to do meaningful ministry things for other people. And so just having that into your life can force you into some of these good conversations. And so building routines that has spirituality and ministry at the forefront will help you as a couple and just spouse to spouse in your spiritual connections. As long as you tag that with everything else, asking the question, pay attention, and encouraging the right things.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely an area where I can struggle some, and it's because our individual spiritual lives, I feel like, look and feel very different from each other, which, imagine that we're totally different people. But I think some of those conversations can start, they can be harder for me because it's like, I'm asking him what's going on, how he's doing, and he's optimistic and he really doesn't get worried or stressed much. And he always has something he's excited about and studying. And then it's like, how am I doing? I'm like, well, I feel terrible and I don't have this going on. And, I'm more like, I lean negative, which is not good. But sometimes that feeling of like, so our conversations are like, I'm good, I'm struggling. Next conversation, I'm good, I'm struggling. But that doesn't mean that those conversations aren't good for me. And so kind of pushing out of my comfort zone, like, yeah, I still want to have that conversation. And some of that is not that to say that, I think you do have a great spiritual life. I don't mean this, but like not to say like, well, his is what everything should look like. Yeah. And mine is not. I just have a very different experience with that. Like I said, I don't rely totally on emotions, but there are definitely a lot more emotions in that situation for me. And I have been pretty, I can rely on the fact that I'm like, he meets with Ronnie once a week. So I'm like, he meets with one of the people that I'm like, man, I would go to you for like any of my problems, and you're so perceptive and you're always going to ask those questions. So I can kind of feel that pull to be like, oh, he's good. like I don't need to ask any questions, because like, surely Ronnie's going to catch anything that needs to be caught. And to some degree, I feel like, yeah, maybe that's true, but Ronnie doesn't see Aaron first thing in the morning, or, after a long day of work. Like, that's me. Like, I'm the person that sees those things. So, there's still value there. And even if those conversations feel difficult or discouraging at first, I think like we have to press through, because of like, there's the value that's there.
Yeah. And the more you dig in, you realize, I like Amy describing, our tendencies there. But yeah, I can be, the stress-free nature of my life is very cool, but it's got a bad side too. I'm so apathetic, and yeah, I'm fine or good with almost anything. And so some of what I define as fine and good is not fine and good. And so it's good to dig in there and get some perspective on that. And us being different there, we pull each other in the right direction. She teaches me to care more when I should. I pull her up from a bit of negativity every now and then. But you got to have those conversations for those differences to be meaningful and impactful for the other. So let's keep going. Is that good for that section, you think? We're still talking spiritual health, and we want to look at it in terms of maintaining spiritual friendships. And so both sides of this coin too. So friendships individually and then as a couple. And so, one of the axioms we do in, I think, all of our churches, focuses all over. One-on-one is how it's done. Maintaining close spiritual friendships and accountability is super, super important. And I'm a big believer, like, you shouldn't rely solely on your spouse for this. Both of you should want the other to have good friends. Yeah. And you should both feel great about them going to hang out with those friends every now and then. Certainly. So it's super important. We need multiple influences. We need encouragers, and some outside perspective is really valuable. So, when you move from, being single to married, sometimes that transition can drop some friends along the way, or at least the time you get to spend with them. And there's different seasons that will certainly look different, but you have to maintain those relationships. I think I said it already. Each of you needs close friends and mentors, and you need people that you're hanging out with.
Yeah, because I think, you look at it, you're like, yeah, my spouse may see me the most, but they're not always getting my best hours, but they do maybe see me the most hours. But sometimes because of that, we can just be too close or too emotionally like wrapped up in something to really speak to it well, or to really be heard. And so I think that's where having those other friends and mentors that can kind of speak into when you're not doing well, or, some of those other things, like they can have a conversation with you and they're kind of removed from that, and you can hear that, and it's not as personal as it can feel when a spouse is trying to have that conversation after you just had a disagreement about this thing. And then it's like, let me challenge you on this part of your spiritual walk or whatever. It's like, I can't hear that. I need to work towards being able to do those things. But sometimes, yeah, Tana can just come in and say, I think you need to look at it this way, or I think you need to consider this. And it's like, oh yeah, like that is accurate. And you are like an outside objective person that's not wrapped up in that. So I think that's just super helpful for your spiritual health and for the health of your marriage, to have some of those people that can speak in And yeah, that more objective way. And even, just outside influence and advice, like he said, kind of helps our perspective even be more outward focused and not like, this is our world and how we do it and it's our stuff. And it kind of helps, push your perspective out to like, oh yeah, this is how what we do impacts other things. And this is not just about us and our feelings and our stuff.
Yeah. No, that's great. Spiritual friends can say stuff in a way that, if your spouse said it, you'd be furious. And if they say it, you're going to take it. And vice versa at times. And so you need those people. And that's living in community. That's what God designed us for. We need those connections. We need those friendships. And, the other part of it, a cool and fun part about marriage is trying to do some of that, as couples with other couples. And, that can certainly be beneficial as well, especially, bringing kids into it. That's been really one of the funnest parts about just doing church like we do it and having kids growing up in the community is all these little friends that get to run around together and parents that are, on mission together and have the same, general ideas about why we're doing this and what we're doing. And there's just a lot of synergy and encouragement and just joyful times that come through all of that. And so certainly, this is another thing you should try and, carve out time for, fellowshipping with people as a couple. It gives you a chance to see each other and that a different dynamic. This is another thing that a lot of marriages can drop. We can do it in dating. We're kind of purposeful, especially in the beginning of let's do a double date and this and that, but can kind of fall by the wayside when, we get married and it's a lot of fun just to hang out together and it's easy just to sort of stay home and do whatever. But yeah, you should make time for this and you can find real benefit in those, broader relationships, couple to couple. Let's see, it's certainly been hard during the pandemic. We haven't done a ton of that lately. We've got some great friends and, that classic just sort of after church on Sunday hangout where you get to grow with different families and couples has been less lately, probably for all of us. But that's been just a great reminder about how cool that is. And you start to miss it. And so, as we start adding to the list here, you'll start to see a lot of things we want to do. We need individual time with God. We want to spend meaningful time together, talking spiritually and praying. We want to have good individual friends. We want to have good couple friends. And you just start adding, there's a lot of things on the list. And so you got to be purposeful and plan and talk about that together in order to make it happen. One other aspect on this before we turn the page maybe is, couples can still be friends with single people, right? Do you guys know that? It's sometimes for whatever reason that just gets weird. And all these people sort of marry up and have fun together and sometimes do stuff as couples. And some of our single friends are sort of left and that's not cool. But there's great examples. We've got, good friends, Jared and Leah Lorenz, and they, I'm kind of jealous of their relationship with Warren. I don't know how much these guys, but he's like Uncle Warren to their kids. He comes over and just hangs out. He's part of the family. They had a weekly night together for a long time. And it's just a really cool deal, just as one example that a married couple can engage with community. Some of the things that we've liked, and you can talk more about this if you want. We've had roommates over the years sort of come in and out, single people that'll just stay in a spare bedroom with us. That's been a lot of fun with our kids and with us. You want to talk about that in here?
Melissa Collini, a lot of you probably know Melissa. She lived with us a couple summers, and that was super fun. She helped, which that was like one of the best things ever. She just kind of out of nowhere was like, hey, can I live with you for a while? It's like, I'm trying to pay my truck off and I maybe can help with the kids. And what do you think? And I was like, never would have crossed my mind. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Sure. And then that was the best idea ever. Like that was, God making that happen. So that was like a fantastic friendship. She is, whether she wants to or not, she's a part of our family. She's moved away, but like we still call dibs on Collini. But yeah, and I think one thing, like when you look at the body and just how you have all of the different, ages and, single, married, old, young, with kids, no kids, like the whole bit. And then you think, yeah, my friendship should look like that. My friendship should look like the body. Like it's great to have friends in your stage of life because they're going through what you're going through. Like they're dealing with the same decisions and questions and how do I decide if I like homeschool or send my kid to school or whatever. So it's great to have people in your circle that, you've got an established friendship with that you can talk through those things. And it's also great to have people who have been through all of that and you can talk to them about those things. And it's great to have that relationship with people that haven't been through all of that yet. Like there is just so much to be gained there. I think even like as a marriage that holds true. Is there anything else?
What do you think?
I don't know. I had like my notes for some reason are in like some small illegible type.
Mine are big and bold.
Yeah.
Because there's better.
I felt less confident in my notes. They're like 10-point font. I don't know what that is. We already talked about like reaching out to singles. Because even if you don't feel like you've changed your behavior, sometimes there's just like a weird thing. So we're like, tell all the married people, reach out to single people. And we tell the single people, reach out to married people and hope that somewhere in there, those connections keep happening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, so at this point, we're going to transition a little bit. So that was a lot about trying to maintain some spiritual health, doing it individually, doing it as a couple.
We've done a group together. Sorry. It's like another way we've connected with couples.
Oh yeah. Small groups.
And in a way that like helped us like discuss spiritual things and be able to kind of like hear what we're learning and kind of read and study some of the same stuff at the same time. Because that's not I'll just confess we're not great at that on our own of like, we're going to read this book together or we're going to do Bible in a year together. Or we're going to do like, we kind of each have our individual thing, but then the small group kind of assigns us as something to kind of have us on the same page and kind of learning some of the same stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
So that kind of is we haven't always had a group like that, but currently we do. And that's been really good.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
No, that's great. I'm glad you put that in there. Okay. We're going to transition.
Real this time.
For real. We're talking about, ministry after marriage and sort of going through just a list of practicals. And we'll try to move pretty quickly through this. But especially, transitioning from single disciples to married disciples. We want to talk a little bit just like what changes, what should change, what shouldn't change. And again, not to say the same thing, but those individual devotion habits obviously should stay. That goes without saying. You should still want to connect with God. You should still be devoted to the word and to prayer. Your devotion to the community and just doing church and groups and however that looks for your community, you want to stay devoted to that. And maintain the purposeful spiritual friendships, mentorships, all of that. Those are, I think it goes without saying, but
we're going to say it anyway. We're going to
say it anyway. There are married couples who get together and sort of throw out all the old habits and we're just going to start fresh. And there may be a little bit of wisdom in that, but we want to be careful not to throw out the good habits. And you want to maintain the things that have brought you to where you are at this point with God. So the individual devotion and the things you're devoted to in the name of Christ should stay there. Where to be involved and how some of those specifics look could certainly change. And one thing that I would say absolutely has to change is the decision-making process for how you're involved in ministry and what you're going to do. Individually, clearly, you're your own person. You make the decisions that make sense to you. Hopefully you're seeking some advice, but it's your schedule, your work, your school, your small groups, whatever it is, you're making those decisions on your own. It can be a pretty big source of conflict if you come into a marriage and still keep making those decisions on your own. That has to shift and become a group decision. And the two of you need to consider how each of you individually are going to do ministry and where you're going to be involved and how you're going to be engaged. You have to, consider the other. It's that part of being one flesh again. Just because we both agree that it would be good for us to be in a small group doesn't mean we go decide when and where that takes place on our own. You got to talk through that together. And, as you stack up the list of things that you hope to accomplish, you need to get pretty practical and purposeful about fitting these things in. And certainly the level of involvement might need to change from season to season, or with kids, without kids, fill in the blank. But that decision-making process has to be together. And so I think that's a very big, important change that you got to make. One bit of scripture that comes to mind here, things that change when you get married. This is 1 Corinthians 7, which is kind of a crazy part of our Bible. Paul's doing a lot of wild stuff in there and throwing out opinions that he specifically says is not from the Lord. This is from me. And other places, no, this is from God, not from me. I won't get into all of that, but one of the points he makes in there is that, the potential for your devotion to be divided is greater when you get married. And in his opinion, the way he says it, this is verse 32 through 34. An unmarried person is concerned about the Lord's affairs, but a married person is concerned about the affairs of this world and how they can please their spouse. And so I think it's just an honest and important thing to consider. Getting married is adding a huge aspect to the things that you do have to be concerned about and you have to consider. And so I want to put a reminder in here to maintain Christ as your first love. Good marriages are awesome, but they can start to compete with your love for Christ if you're not careful. Finding that, quote unquote soulmate or best friend or whatever, and just getting to do the married things that are super fun and exciting, can pull you away from perhaps some of the devotion and purpose that God would like you to put elsewhere. So there's a lot of balance that needs to come in here. And you got to remember some of those hard verses like Jesus said in Luke 14, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father, mother, wife, and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. That's a very stark reminder, classic Jesus and the way he just laid that out there for the big crowd at the time. And we want to maintain our devotion to our spouse in the right position. And that in no way means you're not loving them to the best of your ability. But
we're loving them as Jesus loved us, which is how we're commanded, right? To love everybody. So you're like, oh, that's my love for my spouse, is love like Jesus loved. And then I'm going to love Jesus in like a next level sort of way. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. And so that transition, it can be hard sometimes, but it depends on the couple. And so you just want to make sure as you move into marriage, no matter how long you've been there, that you're constantly submitting your relationship, your marriage to God, and including your devotion, your love for your spouse, that's shaped and framed by Jesus' love and how he calls us to love one another. Some other things to consider in the transition. One fun aspect is that some new areas of ministry become more available, right? Getting married, you sort of have this couple deal and connecting with other couples, connecting, around the whole kids thing. You start meeting your kids start meeting kids, and you've got this opportunity with parents that you never would have come across before. There's a lot to put in there, but the opportunities can really grow if you're paying attention. And so you need to, like in everything, use the stage of life you're in for the mission, and use every avenue you have for connecting and reaching out.
The only thing I would throw in there is just be careful that when you're I'm a young married, I'm going to be reaching out to young marrieds, or, I have kids. Now that's where I'm reaching out. Yes, and that is a new thing that's open. But I think I got kind of tunnel vision where I was younger and married. And then there was this person I worked with, and they were younger and married, and they needed Jesus. So clearly this is the person, right? We're in the same stage of life, easy connection. This is who I'm supposed to pour into. And then halfway through that school year, it's the 45-year-old unhappy married woman who comes in and is help me fix my marriage. And I'm okay, okay, yes. I just assumed kind of you weren't who I was, you're not in that stage that I'm in. And I kind of just wasn't considering, obviously we had a relationship, but I wasn't pouring into that because I'd kind of focused in on I'm going to connect with this person who's like me. So even though some of those things open up, just kind of being aware that, things that don't look like that can come along, and not to get kind of tunnel vision on where you're looking for opportunities to reach out.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I'll stop interjecting so we can move through.
No, we're good. When are we supposed to end this?
There's no problem.
We got time, I think.
Yeah, you got time. I think we said total about an hour and a half, so we've got till.
Oh, nice.
Till
okay.
4:30.
Something that I think is important, as you consider all these new opportunities that would open up, along with, what you felt called to as individuals and maintain throughout that, you need, to really think about how you decide to be involved, and what things you want to accomplish as a couple and individually. And, the need to strike a balance in all these different things that we want to accomplish is really important. That list of friends and mentors and small groups and reaching out and meeting neighbors and going to church and whatever else you put in there, it can add up in a hurry. And so this is where you have to get, prayerful and practical about how to get it done. So some of the things we've done over time that I think is super important is just reassessing as you go, checking in with each other. Some of our routines, whether you think about, Amy working in Focus, that operates on a school year deal. And so there's a natural opportunity just to discuss, what's next year going to look like? What's going on this time around? In Garland, we try to do some of that with our adult small groups and have a moment to sort of re-engage and reassess with the school year. And so lots of those conversations about what small group to be in, when to do it, who are you trying to hang out with, and the practicals and all that we've done over time, in order to fit it all in and still sort of, have a fun life and get to see each other plenty. We've planned small groups in a way that, before kids, we try to get it on the same night, even if we're in different small groups. Two birds with one stone kind of a thing. Kids show up and that's totally different, but purposeful planning. She's got whatever group every Monday night. That would be one of the places where I try to get a one-on-one in the schedule and have them over to the house. And so really doubling up the schedule in purposeful ways to accomplish things at the same time can free you up to get more done and maintain some time together. And if you go about that in sort of a haphazard way, you can end up with a pretty busy schedule, or one or the other of you is going to feel abandoned or left out, or that you're not getting enough time with each other. And so the practical aspect about when you're doing what is super important.
Yeah. And I would say definitely debrief. Yeah. What did this last year look like? How did that feel like? Because sometimes, you could be doing something and you're like, yeah, I felt really good about it. Then find out that, well, I felt like we didn't connect very much, or felt like I didn't see you, or felt like when I did see you, you were emotionally spent. Because that was definitely something I kind of did when I started working full time. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do peer team, and I can do my women's group, and I can do. And then it was just kind of after that year, we sat down and it was like, this was not good for anyone. I just needed to make fewer commitments in that stage of life, for the commitments I made to be good, and for, our marriage to not be just passing each other. Yes. Yeah. So I think debriefing different things that you've tried. It's like, yeah, we tried trying to double this up. Does that work for us? What does that look like?
Yep. That's good. And communication is just so important there, early and often, especially if you individually feel like something isn't going well. Like speak up sooner than later. If you let things linger too long, that's the classic sort of blow up scenario that is no good for a marriage. Let's talk about, real quick, one of the axioms we like. We rarely grow when we're comfortable. So this is a call to push yourselves and push your marriage. One of the dangers, even with a real happy marriage, is just growing insular and really looking inward and just having a great life together, and you sort of forget about the outside world. And so in that example, you've got to maintain a real purposeful missional focus to look outward appropriately and in a balanced way, so that God can use you to do the things that he wants to accomplish in your community.
Yeah, because I think if you kind of stay in this, well, this is comfortable and we like this, and involving more people seems, was it a little uncomfortable to have someone come live with us? And I'm like, oh no, they're going to see all my crazy. And you're like, yeah, that was a little uncomfortable, but oh my goodness, such a good experience, and got to really grow from that.
Yeah. That's good.
That was going somewhere, but now I don't remember. Did you move a page? Yes, you moved the page. We're all good. I think, like you saying, we lose kind of perspective when we get inward focused. And I think we need to kind of remember what that is going to say to the people around us and to the community about what our priorities are and what we think about marriage. Because there'll be unmarried people looking at you and how you are treating marriage. And we don't want to make, marriage, like he was saying, that's not going to be an idol for us. And we don't want to give that impression that we're kind of graduating out of things and into our little comfort bubble. And when we lose some of that outside perspective, we can just get kind of weird. I don't know, maybe the pandemic has made you feel this way too. You're like, I just don't have as much connection. And then you just kind of live in your own little, comfort zone. Most of us are pretty weird, and we just get weirder when we stay in that little bubble. So it's kind of good to be uncomfortable and have people, rub off some of those rough edges that we have. Not that there's anything wrong with being weird, proud to be weird, but, that keep us in a healthy weird and not an unhealthy weird.
Yeah, that's good. One other thing here that I think is super important, even just as a leader of one of our churches and our family of churches, something that I would love to see from more and more young married couples and from everyone, but it's simple. It's take initiative. We need people that will do that, that'll take initiative. Don't wait to be asked, like, please just force your way in and try to get involved. That's, I think, one of the hardest transitions for our unique family of churches. We have a lot of people that graduate out of the Focus deal, and for whatever reason, we step into the broader sort of adult world, and it's a big transition. It feels very different, and we can kind of get lost if we're not owning it and taking initiative individually. And so that's a broad thing that, married or not, but as a couple, it's just another area where it's easy to get lazy on that. And so you can push each other to do this, and you can do this together, but we need people that'll take initiative and talk through it together. What are your gifts? Where do you think God has in mind to use you for his mission? Where could you benefit people in your community? These are questions that you need to ask one another and check in early and often about. And, that doesn't have to be, one of the big acronyms like Focus or Team this or that, or do you guys still have chulas in Denton, whatever weird names you're working with these days? It can be anything as simple as just purposefully getting to know neighbors, purposely asking meaningful questions to your friends in church and in the community. But please take initiative. Ministering as you do life together, I think, is essential as a married couple, and as you try to add all these things to the list. And so that's just a call and a reminder to be purposeful along the way. Take people with you as, you're doing small group or groceries, whatever it is. Our kids help a lot in this as they, meet people or have friends.
Madison has her own guide to decide finder she made for herself.
No doubt. Yeah, our kids have been to small group. They do that guide to decide deal when we do it. Obviously not in the routine, but they start, before we send them away. And that's just a super fun thing. They have all these connections with couples that we've got with, and Madison's obsessed with Focus because Amy does that deal. Lots of good just doing ministry as a married couple and as a family that comes together.
And if you try to, there's some stuff you want to schedule and it's purposeful. This needs a one-on-one serious time, but so much of ministry, like if you wait for uninterrupted time, like you're just not going to get to do any. You just have to do it as you go. It is definitely not a thing you are doing on top of stuff. It's how you do your stuff. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not like, oh, I do Focus, like we're talking about ministry is, talking to your neighbor. We have a crazy, well, I shouldn't say crazy. We have a little neighbor kid that comes over to play soccer and, needs a little Jesus. So he comes over and plays soccer with our kids and they love on him, and, we'll see where that goes. But
yeah. No, and that's an opportunity of one of our neighbors, to connect with his mom and this and that. But he's just a very outgoing, friendly kid and has inserted himself into our lives. He just comes over. And so we got to be purposeful with that. And we plan on it. And it's a lot of fun. But let's stop here and just sort of ask, do you have questions lined up? We have a bit to conclude we can get to, but I wanted to save some space there.
We do. We've had a few come in, so we could jump over to start doing that if you guys would like. Okay. So one question was just what do you guys enjoy for dates, and they're looking for ideas other than fighting about what to watch on TV.
Oh my gosh.
You mean that's not your favorite part, is 45 minutes of what's on Netflix, what's on Hulu? Wow.
Yeah, dates. I mean, that's a good question.
What are dates? No.
This has been hard for us this season of life. We've been pretty careful during the whole COVID deal. We've got some vulnerable people in our lives. And so we've been with our kids almost full time. You could say we have a date every single night because the kids do go to bed and we get time without them, like every single day. And that's very fun and cool. But date ideas, we like to get out of the house when we can. And in a normal season of life, the things we eat. I
was like, we're boring. We like brunch,
Yeah.
like we're fun food people.
Mm-hmm. We've been better about outdoorsy stuff in this season.
Yeah.
We like to walk through cool trails and whatnot. If that floats your boat, there's surprisingly a lot of opportunity for that in our little metroplex here that I was previously unaware of.
I make Aaron play trivia.
Mm-hmm.
He's not necessarily a fan, but
Oh, I dig it.
I'll pull out some like 80s or 90s trivia.
Yeah, we'll play games together. And an effort, and that's fun because we just sort of laugh with each other and at each other, and how terrible I am at trivia. I'll make her change to some like 90s sports package, and then I'll totally own her, and then we'll get in a fight, and then that'll be our day. No, that doesn't happen.
We've definitely like watched, we'll kind of take turns, kind of like Shayla, you were talking about like watching something. It's like, he's going to watch Austin Land with me. And then I'm going to watch basketball with him, like we'll kind of trade off, like kind of bringing each other into the other's world.
Yeah.
We liked live theater back when that was a thing. That was fun. But we're not great. Like, I guess fun date people were pretty boring. I do now set a time limit on deciding. I was like, we have 8 minutes to decide what we're watching. And then, if not, that's it. Like, we're not watching TV. Like, we are not spending more than 8 minutes scrolling through all the choices that we don't want to watch.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I think that gives us more better time, more time that we're not wasting. But that was probably not a helpful answer.
No, that's cool.
That's great. And if anyone hadn't seen, I tried to resend the link to go submit a question. If you think of one, it's dentonnorthchurch.com/marriage. This next one kind of hits at some of the beginning half of the seminar, but anything that has helped you learn how not to take your spouse's issues personally and to minister to them as a brother and sister in Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's hard. We shared a little bit about just our natural tendencies, and one of those, I can be kind of happy-go-lucky to a fault, but just overly optimistic. Everything's cool. I'm good. Life is easy. And she can be a bit negative at times, and not overly so. We've probably overshared on that already. But if I'm not careful, she can share about her life in a way that I feel included. And then I feel like, well, I didn't think this was bad about our marriage, but now I do. And so you do have to work through those things because you are going to have different opinions, and at times probably think something is better or worse than it is. Stereotypically, the guys can be a bit oblivious, and it's probably a good reminder to check in with your wife and say, no, really, how's it going? How are we doing? And you might think you're being a great husband and need a bit of a wake-up call. To not take that personally, I think, again, it's just a decision. Like, let's just decide to be honest with each other. And even if that's a little bit hard every now and then, if you check in early and often enough, there hasn't been enough time for big things to gather and surprise you. And so it's easier to take some feedback, and you just plan to not take it personally because you've asked for that vulnerability and that honesty. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's one of those things that I take a lot of things personally. And that's why I'm like, that focus axiom is good for me to like remember, I shouldn't. I can't. At the end of the day, he's going to make his decisions and his choices and his things. And it's not, I can't take that. That's not I didn't do that. It was, that we are separate people. And, but I'm the type of person, like, I'm going to need that written down somewhere. And when I start to go down the spiral, I need to go read that. I need to go read some truth that it's not about me all the time. I'm not the center of that. So yeah, anytime, if there's a scripture that's helpful for you, but I'm a big fan of cheat sheets. Like, here's a thought I have that's not the right thought. And here's a verse that puts a truth in my head. And I'm just going to go put that back in my head when I start to feel myself just like taking all of that on.
Yeah. And the other thing, those outside influences and mentors, you got to plan and decide how much you're going to share with the mentor here and there about your marriage. That's a two-part decision and discussion. But getting some outside feedback can put the right perspective on things in a way that can help you from really taking things personally, feeling hurt, or all those things that will lead to just more conflict in your relationship.
This next one is pretty good. I think it gets at the heart of it. How can I get my spouse fully sanctified ASAP so they'll be easier to live with?
Did Grant Trotter submit that one?
Almost 100%, I'm sure.
I watched him type it. I watched him.
Yeah.
He did it. He's bad. That's a lot to take on individually. And I'm
not your specific situation, but all.
Is Aaron going to try to answer this?
Yeah, you will.
I'll answer everything. No.
I do have a follow-up question to the one before that question. So, not taking your spouse's stuff personally. I feel like what comes up a lot with my other female friends who are married, it's like, I never understood the nagging trope of a wife until I was married, I think. And I do think in general, we tend to be more concerned about stuff like, our spouse's health, or have they been to the doctor enough? Or like, are we gonna do these, like, which is so funny because Grant will execute health stuff like more easily than I will, but, or I don't know, just planning things in the future or whatever. And so I guess like what I've been reflecting on lately is like, I think we can like invite our spouse to do those things, but when do we kind of call a warning shot to our spouse without trying to like criticize them into changing, I guess? Because you can't criticize anyone into really changing, but I think this totally goes in line with not taking your spouse's stuff personally, ministering to them the way Jesus did. But Jesus like did speak bold truth, but so often, way more often, he like invited than, whatever. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to go? You want me to go?
I mean, what popped into my head is not something I deal with like with Aaron per se, but with my mom and my aunts. I've invited them several times to go to the doctor like they were supposed to, unsuccessfully. But I think, I had to talk with Tana about that. I'm like, I don't know like what to do here. And I really did kind of have to have a really hard conversation that looked like, coming from a place of like, I love you. And these things like I don't know how to not be concerned for this. And, I would do this for you, if I could, but it's like, I am concerned, like your choices are impacting me here. And I wish I could not love you and remove that impact, but I can't. Like, it impacts me. Well, maybe you shouldn't say like, I wish I didn't have to love you, but like, you wish that wasn't a thing, like that you didn't have to be impacted that way, but you are. And yeah, so much more in a marriage, like we talked about, that you're one deal now, but you kind of have to leave that there and just let them know, like, yeah, okay, so you're making a decision for you, but you're also making a decision because it really impacts me. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of had to like leave it there. Right? At least that's where I am with that. So yeah, I think we can remind those people that we love that we are connected, and that it's not just about you not taking care of yourself. It's you're not taking care of us. Mm-hmm. And
yeah. And when that, with your spouses, when that sort of crosses over into the nagging realm or whatever, and that has negative connotations, for a reason. It is hard to work that balance, because we want to spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And so, you should long for a spouse that'll spur you on a little bit. But there is wisdom and discernment, because that, depending on the thing we're after, could fall into that nagging category. And so I would, have a check-in when you're checking in about spiritual health and well-being and everything else. If you're going to do the homework after this deal, soon, add that if you think, am I nagging? Like, ask. I've said this a couple times. I hope that's out of love. Is it good for me to keep saying it? Does it annoy you? Or is it a fresh reminder? And try to get some feedback from your spouse, and vice versa. Like, I know you're out for my best interest, but if you ask me that again, like, I'm going to lose it. Like, I'm being honest here. And so, and set some times, like, whatever it is, I will commit to get this done by, this date, if you will commit to not ask me about it again. Like, if you have to go there. And otherwise, just check in. Does this feel naggy? Do you want that feedback more or less? And you may be surprised. You may have one of you feeling nagged about something they wouldn't have thought, and wanting feedback on something else. And so just check in and ask those questions. Yeah.
And I would say, like, 2, asking more questions in terms of, like, if it's something they're not doing or something, that's why, like, kind of what's the source of that? Because sometimes it can be just goofy stuff. Like, they're doing 10 other things, and every time they think to call and schedule that, they're closed. Like, I've thought about that 10 times, but like, no, it's still not done, because when I was free, like, that wasn't a possibility. But kind of getting to the bottom of why maybe some of that stuff isn't happening can be helpful, because sometimes it's things you can do. Like, I mean, I had someone schedule me a dentist appointment one time, like, because I was just like, and so, like, Brad Davis called and scheduled me a dentist appointment back in the day. I need to go again. I should tell Brad to call. But, sometimes it was just like, the other person can step in and do a small piece, and then that can get the ball rolling too.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Someone in this group, I won't say who, recently went to the dentist, and it had been 9 years since they went. And I won't say who it is. It's not me or Grant. I can say that much. So,
I feel you. I don't like the dentist.
I've got 2 more. If we can hit them, I think they'd be good. We actually have a lot of really good questions, but one of them kind of has to do with small groups. And I think you guys answered a few of the small group related questions, but this one stood out. What are your thoughts on co-ed small groups with couples together versus being in gender specific small groups? And do you think co-ed small groups foster spiritual growth for you guys as a couple versus some of the benefits of maybe a gender specific small group?
Yeah. I think there certainly are pros and cons. And so some of it can kind of be seasonally. We have done both. We have preferred same-sex separate groups for several years. We've really enjoyed a co-ed deal recently. I do both currently. Our co-ed deal meets every other week, which makes that a little easier. I like maintaining a guy's small group. For me, that's sort of a personal preference, but that's a valid question. And depending on what your church is doing, if both offerings are there, yeah, talk about it together. So I think the separate same-sex groups can be very good individually and perhaps easier to get into some specific, man-woman issues that we all need at different times. The co-ed thing can certainly foster some spiritual discussions between the two of you. But that, the co-ed things can also just be sort of a big hangout sometimes. And so you have to sort of determine what that's going to do for you. But we more often than not have leaned towards the separate groups, just practically in our history. But we've done the co-ed thing and really enjoyed it too. I'm totally riding the fence here. I think you need to talk about what you need individually and what the two of you are after and discuss it. If you feel disconnected spiritually, the two of you, a co-ed deal that has you, doing spiritual things together, reading the same thing, discussing the same thing could be really great. If you've got a meaningful check-in every now and then, you know how each other's doing, a real purposeful same-sex group might have the opportunity to get deeper and more personal in your spiritual life in a very good way.
Nice. Okay, one more. This one's kind of a big one. Can you share some reasonable, realistic, and specific expectations for your marriage and ministry during the newborn to toddler years? And I think they kind of went on to say, basically in the context of Denton North, we are going to have this wave of lots of kids coming pretty soon, and it's already kind of starting. And so just having a lot of our married couples being in that phase. And I think it's kind of where they're coming from.
Yep. Super good question. I guess the baseline of what I'll say is your involvement and what it looks like will certainly have to change. In our deal, we have twins, and we got 2 kids. They were twins. That's a little different experience.
But it's the only one we have.
That's all we got. But that was insane. And we had some difficult twins, like just the practicals of, breastfeeding and wanting to do that for a time. And we were inflexible for a while. And so I remember asking Ronnie leading up to during the pregnancy, how do you think, my deal with staff and just everything with church, what do you think it would look like? And he's like, yeah, it's just all going to change. We just can't even talk about it. It's just going to be completely different. And so we sort of worked on that together through that deal. But with all that said, there could be the necessity to do a bit less, but you just don't want to drop everything. You need to carve out time to maintain some aspects of what we've talked about throughout this, even in that newborn phase. And I think you can do that. We managed to do that with, in my opinion, being outnumbered. I think the proper ratio is 2 adults to 1 infant. And the twin thing, there's no taking turns. You can this one's not crying. You can trade, but we always had at least 1 baby. It was insane.
It was crying.
Yeah. But, so getting help, I think, is a big part of this. It's that inward focus thing. And with kids, we can feel embarrassed to ask for help, or surely everyone's better at this than we are, so we just don't. The community thing is so cool, the whole, it takes a village, whatever comes to mind, tapping into your students and focus there. Just get the longest list of babysitters you can.
Or even Melissa would come over in the mornings and like help me get the kids ready because he had to leave early to go do worship stuff for church. So it was like, that was important to us that he got to keep doing that. And so, yeah, I could not get 2 babies out of the house and get to church on time by myself. Like, I know women can, I'm not that woman. And she came over and she helped me on Sunday mornings. And you kind of feel like, yeah, I'm a mom fail, but it's like, we wanted to make that part of ministry still happen for him. And so, yeah, we had to have help to be successful. Or I had to ask, for people to meet me at my house instead of being like, oh, I'm going to take everybody. I couldn't take the 2 by myself out and meet with people one-on-one. I'm like, if you can come to my house, and I just had to be more, I think, okay with letting people see the mess of this part of life, and it's part of life, and be more okay. Asking for people to like maybe bend to me a little bit in that season. And most people, like, they don't care if they meet you at Starbucks or your house, or they don't care if you have dishes in your sink. People came, Focus Kids came and did sermons in my living room so that I could like give them feedback. But it was like, that's what I could do. And, just kind of being pretty honest about, hey, I still want to do this. Here's what I think I can make happen.
And then, working together. I don't remember exactly. Certainly there's a time where we, didn't do small group, but it wasn't super long.
No.
And as soon as, we could manage a couple hours with those kiddos on our own, we were sending each other back to group, like on purpose. Like, you need some space from this madhouse, and we know it's important. And so, being willing to do that for each other is part of that sort of help cycle. But yeah, bring people in. Don't be scared of inviting people in your house. I would second all of that. Did we cover? I felt like there's a few aspects of that question. Did we lose any of it?
I think that was good. It said reasonable, realistic, or specific expectations for marriage and ministry during the newborn to toddler years. I think you guys hit that pretty well.
Yeah. And during marriage, I would also say your marriage, I felt like, life before marriage and then like getting married, it was different, but it wasn't that different. You're like, okay, I'm living with this other person, and life with kids is definitely its own new deal in life. With small kids is another deal all in itself. And so I think that is one of those things where you will have to be intentional to have your life not just be kids and things in your schedule. That will run your life. And if you still want to have good conversations, during that hour or 2 that you see each other and are somewhat conscious, that's going to have to be intentional. And so I think, should you expect vibrant date nights? Well, I mean, maybe that works in your situation and your kids are great and you can leave them with a sitter and, they'll take a bottle or they'll do this or that. Like, maybe that's you and great. But realizing maybe falling asleep to a Netflix show is going to be like, that's going to be, we purposed to fall asleep watching Netflix together. Like, that was our choice to invest in each other, or we had that good conversation. So I think that can be a little hard if you're not purposeful. That can get lost in the mix for sure.
Yeah, it'll have to change, but you can still be engaged. And if you do it with community, that the help goes a long way. So don't do it by yourself, and plan to maintain, some minimum levels of involvement, because that'll help you through all of that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's end it there. Knoles, thank y'all so much. Let everybody tap the clap emoji or whatever the best way to do this on Zoom is. But there we go. We had a few pop up quickly. You guys know your
Arsenio.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, and a lot of other good questions we didn't get to. So I'd say that these are questions that you can ask the Knoles separately, or send to another, or ask another married couple in whatever church you're in. And I think these are good questions that are totally fair game to be asking people in different stages of life from us. Sorry that we didn't get to all of them. One last, I believe, Grant question that might just be a good one to have in our minds is, Amy, do you find it challenging that Aaron's beard is a different color than his hair?
It's one of my favorite things because it makes him look older than me.
This is,
And I have a weird thing about being older than him, so I love it.
There we go. That's good.
Yeah, this is wisdom, Grant. I don't know if you probably don't know. This is from years of something.
So, half of him is wise.
Grant has the Joe Dirt patchiness. Like, it's going to take a while, I think.
Yeah.
Nice.
To get the Knoles wisdom beard.
Yeah.
A couple housekeeping things to close us out is the little homework form PDF thing is on the link, the website I sent, dentonnorthchurch.com/marriage. And the ideal, do this however works best for you, but we really thought that if possible and schedules allow, to do a date night like tonight would be amazing, or just in the next week, and include that homework as part of your date night would be really cool. And I believe Leslie mentioned that at some point at Denton North, but that's kind of the design for the homework, to get you rolling, but also kind of give an impetus to go have a date night. Maybe some of you guys are good doing that frequently. I know Em and I aren't. And so kind of assigning you a date night for fun, but also giving you some things to talk about on the heels of this seminar would be really good. So go download that PDF. If anyone has trouble finding it, text me or ask me in some other way, and maybe we'll even post that specifically on some of the pages. But the other thing I wanted to say is that the next seminar is going to be on May 8th. That's going to be about conflict and communication by the Sestitas. So that'll be a cool one. The plan right now is to probably also have it at the same time, but if we get feedback that a different time would work better for most people, then we'll change that up. So don't just pencil in 3 p.m. at the moment, and spread the word on that. And we'll be doing one a month for the next little while. Okay, Claudia said 3 p.m. worked great for them. So we thought we don't want to make anybody wake up early on a Saturday if you can help it, so let's not do it at 9 a.m. or whatever. But and so that'll be on May 8th. And then the next one after that is still being decided a little bit, but most likely June 5th. So just kind of get those penciled in on your calendar, but we'll try to announce them and post them in the other church groups a little sooner, as the Doomfields have made it pretty clear that would be helpful. So I think that might be it. Any last questions or confusion that I could maybe clear up, or that the Knoles could clear up? Sweet. Guys, thank y'all so much for coming. Knoles, thanks again for being willing to do this. I really, really enjoyed it. I was very excited personally just to get to be in the audience for this, and just so thankful that y'all were willing to do that.
Yeah, we're happy to do it anytime. Thank you.